Welcome to Lipstick and Legacy, a podcast where your story matters and your journey has purpose. Together, we lift and inspire our communities, one story at a time. Welcome, Jennifer.
Welcome.
I'm so glad you're here with me today. I have Jennifer Robinson, and I would love to have you tell us, for people meeting you for the first time, who are you? Where are you from? What's the best way to describe you beyond your titles?
So thank you so much for having me. The best way to describe me, one of my handles is being fancy in Philly that I use on social media. And I think a lot of my friends would call me fancy, but not in a, snooty way, just like, I like fancy, fun things. So I would say that. I would say engaging, hopefully. And hopefully I would say memorable.
You're definitely all of those things. I've heard you speak before. You're a phenomenal speaker with an extraordinary story.
Thank
I
you.
was going to ask you to highlight the little girl, Jennifer, who, how would they describe you? What does she look like as a young child?
She was also very fancy and somewhat disrespectful and argumentative and talkative. All the things that I think as an adult are probably great qualities. So, I mean, I was a bright kid. I was very creative and inquisitive, but also, asked my parents so many questions that they actually bought me a book called The Big Book of Answers, where they were hoping, like, when I asked my questions, I could refer to the book and for the answers. But of course, I found questions that weren't in the book. And it was like, why? So, I mean, I've heard my parents tell that story a bunch of times. And, I definitely got the too talkative in class. My father's, 80 years old and still a trial attorney, and I used to go watch him in court, and I used to love it. And I knew from that age that that was something I wanted to do. So I think definitely argumentative, but probably, hopefully in a good way, but maybe not. So I think all of those things, I would say.
I'm a substitute teacher. I used to teach school, and whenever kids are talking in class, I'm like, there's a leader, there's a leader, there's a leader, and like now just be quiet for a minute because they always have a lot of questions, a lot of inserts. They're just chatty. It's a really great sign in children. You wear many hats. You're an attorney, communication expert, TEDx speaker. You've done an influencer and advocate. What role right now feels the most at home for you?
So I would say, I just took a new job role. I am executive director of something called the Philadelphia Fashion Incubator. And what that is a year-long residency where we select and recruit designers from the greater Philadelphia area, and we put them through a year of business classes and fashion mentoring to help them grow their brand. And in addition to that, we also hold different fashion workshops and events for the public. So I'm super excited about the new role, and I feel like it really brings together a lot of everything that's come before for me because, having a law background will help me with that, having a communications background, having some background in PR and media and TV and all of that. I think that's going to play into this. And I did workshops and speaking for many years and continue to do it. So hopefully I can be a resource for our designers with all of those things as they grow their brand. Going back to the little girl question, I remember how much fashion played a role from the time I was little. I mean, my mom was very fashionable. Both of my grandmothers, they all made clothes too, and they were fantastic. I didn't inherit that, but I just remember these battles with my mom, like, wearing a summer sundress with a matching hat and shoes in the middle of winter, and her telling me, like, there's snow on the ground and you have to wear a jacket. And I do remember one time where I picked an outfit like that, and she stood me outside, like in the 20-degree weather, to prove to me that I would be cold and need a jacket. And I was like, nope, I'm good. Still want to wear my dress. So I think from a young age, fashion was a big part of my life. And so I love that everything I've done, in my career and then as a creator and just covering different fashion events and business is all coming together in this role. So I'm really excited about it.
That's really fun to have people like mentors in your life, your mother, your grandmother. I had that same thing. My grandmother was a dancer in Las Vegas, and my mother owned a costume store. And so everything I see in clothing or costuming, I see through a different lens than maybe somebody else because we have this like background where it's like, why do when you can overdo? That's kind of
Right, of course. Why be average? Right.
wear the thing, wear the evening gown. So your story is fascinating. You started out as an attorney. Can you tell me a little bit about you going into law and how that changed and why?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, my dad is still at 80 a trial attorney. That basically means a courtroom attorney doing jury trials and bench trials and that sort of thing. And I used to go watch him in court, and I always knew I wanted to go to law school from the time I was little. And I did go to law school, and I really also wanted to be a courtroom lawyer and stand up and argue in front of people, which is what I did for about a decade. And then I had, as you know, a near-death accident, and it took me out of practicing law. First and foremost, because I had a TBI, a traumatic brain injury. So I was in a position at the time where I couldn't find words. I couldn't remember my cases. I couldn't think on my feet. I couldn't even deal with light and noise. If you were in a room where, let's say, the air conditioning or heating system was loud, or there was a lot of fluorescent lighting, that would distract me enough that I couldn't remember what I wanted to say. So that was really challenging because I was, I think 35 years old, newly married, as a newlywed. It happened the year after we got married. And, my career was just basically lost in an instant. And to be honest, that was like actually the least way my life changed because, in the immediate, I just had so many, injuries and surgeries and went down a very, very hard road of physical and mental recovery, which included, a lot of mental issues related to PTSD and depression and anger and anxiety and just trying to get my life back together.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the accident? What occurred, if you don't mind talking about that?
Sure.
That people, sometimes these things happen in our life where there's just a freak accident or a moment where everything just shifts and it pushes us into a different trajectory than the path that we were on. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was a pedestrian. I was on the University of Pennsylvania campus, which is downtown Philadelphia, here where I live. And I was walking across the street in a crosswalk, and I got hit and then pinned underneath a truck. I was conscious for all of it. I did not lose consciousness till the ambulance, which I think is where the PTSD came in. So, I mean, I have a very, very good recollection of what all happened. I have a recollection of the truck being literally like against my face and my body crushed and people around me talking and they had to get I know there's a special name and I always forget it, some kind of device on a truck that came, lifted the car off of me to get me into an ambulance, and that was when I lost consciousness. And you definitely do feel like, I mean, for all the reasons I've already said, but even in that moment, I felt like I had a moment where I was kind of above myself. I know that probably doesn't make sense, but like kind of seeing everything flash before me, like, is this it? And then I lost consciousness, like I said, in the ambulance, and it was a long road. But to your point, I mean, this was many years ago. This was 2008. So, we're going on my anniversary life day is next week. So what is that? I can't do math. I think it's 18 years. It's a long time. And I definitely have a lot more perspective on it. And I also see the positive that's come out of it in my life. Even when something terrible happens, there's always positive things to come out of it. And I think the trajectory of my life completely changed. I mean, I was a great lawyer. I was a successful lawyer. I loved what I was doing, but I was working for insurance companies. And at the end of the day, I was saving insurance companies money or not saving insurance companies money. And I feel like everything I've done since has just been something that brings me more joy and passion and meaning. Because, as you mentioned earlier, I do a lot of work in speaking and advocacy in the healthcare and brain injury space now in my own community where, I had rehabilitation and everything. And that's super meaningful, that I can do that and be there for people that are going through it who are either patients or caretakers. So I look at that as a great positive, and I think also it helped me shift what was important in my own life, spending more time with family and friends and really prioritizing things I wanted to do instead of felt obligated to do. I think it shifted a lot of that for me.
What were some of the hardest invisible battles during recovery that you had that were kind of maybe the outward like people wouldn't see it? People are like, "Oh, what do I do?" You send flowers, you send a
Right.
text, and you're sitting there not being able to do whatever it is. What did that look like for you? Can you give me an example?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I had a lot of people. Once I got out of ICU and I was home, and I had therapists that were coming in for about 2 months before they decided I was well enough to go to outpatient rehab. And during those 2 months, I had a ton of family and friends who came to visit. And, in hindsight, I was probably terrible to them because I had so many issues I was dealing with and I had a lot of anger. I remember being very jealous at the time of my husband just because I watched him go to work and get in his car and have a normal day. And I was stuck with therapists trying to like open a cabinet to take my medicine and get to the bathroom, and like that was my day. So I had a lot of anger, and I feel like there were people who tried to stick by me, and there were other people, like you said, who just didn't really know what to do or how to manage it. So in the immediate, I dealt with a lot of that. As time went on, and a lot of the bruising and blood and everything, that was visible, um, went away. I mean, I definitely had a number of surgeries over the next couple years, but there were definitely interims where there wasn't any blood or bruising, and I wasn't on crutches or some other surgery that you could visibly see. And that was actually the hardest time because they do say that for a lot of people, TBI and also mental problems can be invisible. And, people come up to you and say, you look great, or like you look totally normal, like you must be better, like life is good, right? And that's very triggering when life is not good and you're going through a lot,
So that's probably what you wish more people would understand. And it's a hard thing. And I know I've been in those situations where people they just kind of look at you and they're like, they don't know what to say, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah,
I think you have to have some grace for people because
sure.
they don't know what to say in those situations.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else about your accident? One thing I like to ask is, how did that change your before and after? Like, there's these events that split our lives into the before the accident and after, and that's kind of
Sure.
a splitting event. How did you see your life differently before and after?
I felt like, and this may sound completely egotistical to say, but this is just how I felt. I felt like God saved me for a reason. I should have died on that street, and I felt like I had a purpose, and I also felt like part of my purpose was to make sure I was happy. And I felt like in some ways that made me a lot more selfish. I mean, we've chosen not to have children. We travel, we live our life, and I feel like I missed out on so many years between the accident and my recovery and all the surgeries. I don't want to take care of anybody else. I love my nieces and nephews, but that was a decision that I made because primarily of the accident. I mean, it's not that before the accident I was one of these people that like I knew I always wanted to be a mother, but who knows how it would have turned out differently. But I definitely know after the accident I was like, I'm not going to spend all my time taking care of anyone. Like, I'm just going to live my life. So, in that way, I think it made me more selfish. But as I said, I think it also made me appreciate things a lot more. Appreciate not only the people around me, but even simple things like there was such a long period of time I couldn't shower on my own, and I didn't have a driver's license because of my head injury. And, I had various parts of my body that didn't function for a long time. And, my right arm had been shattered and things like that. So, I mean, just the simple things that you take for granted, like, getting dressed by yourself in the morning and not waiting for someone to help you in and out of a shower and, not having to stay on one floor of your house because you can't navigate the stairs and you might hurt yourself. Like just those basic things that I don't think any of us really think about until we're in a position where we can't do them. So that definitely made me more appreciative of that. And really just having a sense of responsibility, but in the best way of, like I said, just being more involved with a community where I knew I could help. I mean, I knew as a patient, a former patient, a lawyer, and a speaker, there was so much that I could do for people that didn't have a voice in this community, whether that's specifically with brain injury or just healthcare advocacy in general, because I speak on a lot of panels and at conferences where I talk about still the inequity of the healthcare system and improvements that can be made in healthcare communications and technology and things that have changed for the better since 2008, because that was a long time ago, but we still have a ways to go for a lot of people in a lot of ways. And so, I mean, I try my best to be an advocate. And, when I do go and talk about my story, like I'm doing with you now, I meet so many people and their caregivers, spouses, mothers, siblings, whatever it is, who really appreciate hearing a personal story that's not all rainbows, that's not, I'm really honest about everything I went through in a lot more detail than I'm doing for this. And, and I also think the path is not linear. Like sometimes you're taking steps backwards and it's very aggravating, and recovery takes 3 times as long as you think it will. And, people that are a year or two out from brain injury think like, why am I not better? And, in some ways there's no better. I'm 18 years out and I still have impacts. You can't see it all the time, but it's there, and, I still feel very fortunate because I know there are people who would have died right on that street.
I have a question about you telling your story. I've heard your story before. You just told me it's 18 years old. How do you keep your story authentic and feeling fresh? Do you ever get tired of telling your story? And then third question, if you can remember all these, do you think it's important for somebody to dig back in their past and tell a story that happened 20 years ago?
So it's interesting you say that. I remember years ago when I was a new speaker, I went to hear someone speak, and I won't mention names, but she's an amazing woman. And she had been in an accident even worse than mine with an 18-wheeler truck, and had lost part of her leg permanently and had been a marathon runner before that. And she was telling her story, and she had written a book, right? And I remember thinking, and her accident happened a long time before, like more than a decade, maybe 2 decades before, I was standing there watching her tell her story and talk about her book. And I remember thinking at the time, like, wow, what an amazing story, how far she's come, but also why did it take her so long to put this story out? And, here I am 18 years later, because you know me, I've been working on getting a book out. It's not out. It took me a long time to feel like I even had something to say in any perspective to start writing it. And every time I feel like it's at the right point and finished, it's not. So, when you talk about keeping your story fresh, I mean, my life keeps changing. I think one of the ways the accident changed my life that I haven't mentioned yet is I'm a lot more willing to take risks and do new things that I wasn't before the accident. So for me, it's like, what's next? I never feel like it's too late. I never feel like I'm too old. I always feel like, I have the time because I was given time. I'm like on borrowed time because, like I said, I mean, a lot of people would not have made it. So, I mean, I feel like it's really important for me to continue to tell the story, to keep it fresh by showing everything that I continue to do, which maybe 5 years ago I couldn't do or wouldn't do. And now I'm willing to do because my mental attitude is different or I'm physically stronger than I was. And do I ever get sick of telling the story? It's hard. I mean, sometimes when I feel like going into a talk, it might be on autopilot for me. Like these are the things I'll share. Those are kind of the times sometimes where I just like burst out in tears on the stage for no reason. And I'm like, I don't know why that happened today. Sometimes it's like I remember giving one talk where it was very close to the anniversary of when my mother had died. And I was talking about the accident, I was talking about her, and I just lost it like in the middle of the talk. And that happens. I mean, hopefully I'm able to get it back together enough that people still take what they need from it, but it still happens. So I really don't get sick of telling it because I never really feel like it's on autopilot. Different things come out, and I'm a different person every time I give it.
I recently heard somebody speak, and as the woman was telling her story, it didn't have that freshness. I'm like, I just feel like this woman has told the story so many times that it's lost its connectivity. And I don't know what
Right.
that was. And that's actually why I asked you that question is how you keep it that way. You've done TED Talks, you speak all the time. And so that's really interesting. I love how you say that what you're doing now, it changes your perspective. So, like when you're writing your book that you've talked about, we'll to get into that a little bit. It's like it changes all the time because your perspective is always changing.
Totally.
And
Yep.
it's never done. I have a book, I keep thinking it's ready to publish, and I'm like, no, it needs another edit. And my husband's like, you've edited it 4 times, like just put
I
it out.
know.
I'm like, well, no, it's not perfect yet because it does.
I know.
So that's a hard one for sure.
It's also hard when you're doing what essentially is some kind of memoir, where do you end it? Like what kind of note does it end on? I think that's the thing I'm struggling with the most.
That's interesting. You have been named Best Social Media Influencer 2025. What does that recognition represent for you personally? Like, I don't even know what that is. What is that?
Yeah, so there's a local magazine here called Mainline Today. It's a magazine for the Philadelphia suburbs that's pretty well known here, and they had their inaugural. They give awards every year. They do a best of issue every year, but last year they decided for the first time to do a social media award, and I received it. So I was very excited. I've been doing content creation for probably about a decade. And a lot of it is in the fashion, lifestyle, travel space, but certainly there's a little bit of politics and healthcare and speaking and everything sprinkled in. And, as I've gotten older, I feel more and more need to represent in that space. I'm 53. Most of the content creators that I know in my area and I encounter are significantly younger than me. There's not a lot of people in this over 50 space. And I think it's so important, because I feel like, you and I feel like a lot of women that we know through our Classic Universe pageant organization, we are different kinds of women. Like we see possibilities. I definitely know a number of people around me who are my age range, women, who feel like life has kind of passed them by, that they're becoming invisible, that it's too late for them to do certain things. So, I mean, I feel like a really strong pull to represent in that creator space, even if it's something silly, like here's my outfit of the day, because I feel like I take more fashion risks now that I'm older than I used to. Like I'll wear like a two-piece and show my stomach, which I would have never done at 25, but at 53, I'm like, who cares, So I think things like that are important. I mean, for me, I've struggled with my weight my whole life too. So I mean, my weight's gone up and down since I was 9 by 100 pounds either direction. And I definitely feel like that is also important, to show that you are positive and comfortable at whatever size you're at, that you can go out and do things. You can take pictures and you can post them. And, you're not waiting till you lose 20 pounds or whatever the case may be, because I think a lot of women do that. So I love representing in that space. I feel like it's super important.
You feel like I noticed that too, especially I've been trying to do more content creating, and I just have this new fire at 50. I'm like, you know what? I'm just owning this now. And I feel like when I watch this younger generation, I'm like, they have the energy, but they don't have the wisdom and the perspective.
Right.
And I think that's a really important thing. Do you feel like there is space in that arena that like 50 to 65? I feel like it's the new 30, or am I just old and that's what I want to tell myself?
No, I think you're right. I mean, people always make that comparison online. They show, a group of friends today, and then they show the Golden Girls, and they remind us that the Golden Girls was supposed to be a group of women in their 50s. But women in their 50s look so different these days, and like it's just not the same, and we're not doing the same things. We're still doing second and third careers, and we're doing so many good things in our community. I see, influencers that are in the 75, 80 space. I mean, think of Iris Apfel, and how she was as a fashion icon into the time until the time that she passed away. I mean, I look at her as somebody I really emulate. Like, I hope I'm like that at her age and that fabulous with all my statement jewelry and my matching, kaftans and glasses and everything. I mean, she's so fabulous. So I think there's space for everybody. I don't think I won't say any, I'll say all of the PR companies and brands really look at the space that we're in. Like, I feel like there are a lot of things that come my way, and then they say we want people, X age to X age, and usually it's till 40 or 45. A lot of people assume that I am still that age range, and then I have to tell them I'm 53, and they're like, oh, and I don't know why that should matter, but I feel like there are a lot of things that where it does matter. I have some PR companies I work with in my area that are so good to me, and I think they just get it. They get it that there's a place for everyone. I mean, like I said, my husband and I don't have kids. We're considered dinks, dual income, no kids. And, I feel like there's a lot in that space of like over 50 and like couples content and things like that. And for travel, we're the generation that has more money than the 25-year-olds, and hopefully they'll have more money when they get older.
like these dress shops are always showing like 25-year-old girls in these dresses, and I'm like, you need to be showing their moms with them because I'm the one that's going to spend the $80 on a dress. They don't have $80 to spend on it.
Right. I didn't have that. I had nothing when I was their age. I mean, I was lucky. I worked at a few retail clothing stores and got a big discount, and that's pretty much where my clothes came from. So, I mean, I just think some of the companies that don't see that are very short-sighted, but the ones that do, I really appreciate and I continue to work with.
I really love that. What advice would you give to a woman in her midlife that feels like they've missed their moment? Like, oh, I feel old and my new word's crusty, musty, and I'm 50 and like I've already lived my life. The best things have passed. What would you say to somebody?
I mean, I think life is about your outlook, and it's a terrible outlook, and I'm a pretty outspoken person, so I feel like I'd actually say that to them. Like, that's a terrible statement, and I'd explain why. I mean, I just feel like you're only as old as you feel. Life has never passed you by, I mean, I remember when I was in law school, we had somebody in my section who was like, I think in their 70s, who had just decided they wanted to go to law school, and I thought it was so great. I mean, it's never too late. So, I mean, I'm also somebody that doesn't really have the patience for that outlook, I think, given what I've been through in my own life. So I have heard that from people, even within my own family. And I listen for a minute, then I explain my position. And then if they keep complaining, I really shut it down because I can't listen to it. I'm just like, life is too short. If this is how you want to live your life, doom and gloom, everything's passed you by, then so be it. Like, I'm going to surround myself with positive people who are doing things.
I really love that. Now, you talked about your book that you are going to put out eventually called Lucky.
Eventually.
I know this is going to happen because I know you're driven. It just has to be the right time, and I really do
Right.
understand that. Is this book? Tell me just briefly what that's about and what
Yeah.
you want people to know about that when it does come.
The book is called Lucky. The title's done, the cover's done, the draft has been done. And it's really about feeling like, even though a lot of people would say what happened to me was unlucky, in a lot of ways it was lucky. In some of the ways I've already explained, here in this interview today. So really, it goes through a lot of stories about how there were things that other people might interpret as unlucky that I thought were lucky. Like, one example is when I was graduating law school. As I said, I wanted to be a courtroom lawyer. So my dream was to work at the public defender or the district attorney's office because those were young attorneys that were in court every day. And I got an interview at the DA's office, and I interview very well. So once I got the interview at the DA's office, I was like, okay, I know I have to go do a great interview, but I thought basically this is going to be a done deal for me because I'm going to excel at this. And the interview was a disaster. I felt like, right, there's just no other way to put it. The guy that interviewed me, he just seemed to have it out for me from the time I sat down. I went to Villanova Law School, which is in the suburbs here, and he seemed very much of the philosophy that somebody who was white and who lived in the suburbs, like, basically could not handle a job like this. And he made that known. And he had no idea, what I had been through in my life. And, even before, this was before the accident. I mean, just my upbringing and everything. And so I got very defensive and argumentative. And I knew when I left the office, like, there was no chance I was getting this job. So, ultimately, I ended up going to a civil firm at an insurance company because I had a girlfriend from law school that was there, and she said, I know you really wanted a job where you're going to court, and it may not be the most exciting work, but I'm in court almost every day. So why don't you come here? So I did. And that's where I met my husband. So I feel like if I had gotten that job at the DA's office, I might have never met my husband. So I feel like things happen for a reason, and that's like one example of a story from the book from my life.
I can really relate to that, and I know a lot of people can. Those things that don't happen. When I was young and had six little kids, and my marriage had fallen apart, and all of this, and I thought, how am I ever going to get my life back? And my life today is so much better than I could have ever expected it. But it was so hard to get here. But how
Yeah,
grateful I am for all those hardships that I came through. I'm really grateful for those. I call them blessings. You can call it lucky, whatever
yeah,
you want to call them.
absolutely.
Couple last questions. So when was your TED Talk? What year was that?
That was 2020, and that was also really challenging because I had applied and been rejected for 5 years. And I'm a very big visualization person, so I saw myself on that stage with the red logo and friends and family in the audience. So lo and behold, December of 2019, I finally get a TEDx and it's at University of Arkansas. So already I'm like, that kind of sucks because although I wanted the TEDx talk, now I'm going to fly to Arkansas by myself with no family and friends, and it's just going to be a TEDx talk, which but it's great. It's an amazing accomplishment, but it already wasn't going to look like what I'd hoped to do it in my own area with my own people. And then the country shut down the week before I was supposed to give the talk. So I was given a choice to wait to see if they would reschedule it a year later or to tape it in alone in Philadelphia in an empty studio with no red TED logo, no audience, nobody smiling at me, which is what I did. And then it was put out in June of 2020. You know, if you look at it online, it doesn't have the background of a lot of people, but it made it from TEDx to the TED.com site, which a lot of the talks don't. So it was definitely one of their more featured talks, and it was all about resilience and change and overcoming challenges. And I think, you know, when we talk about things happening at the right time, I wanted it to happen years before. Ultimately, though, I think it was 2020, June of 2020 was exactly the time people needed to hear that message. We were all going through so much with everything shut down and everybody's lives in upheaval for different reasons. So I feel like it actually was released at the right time.
If you were going to give the TEDx talk today, how would it change? How would your message change, or how would it stay the same?
You know, I really think my message would mainly stay the same. I just feel like I would focus on different things because I've done so much since 2020. And, you know, I feel like I would have to incorporate some of that.
I love that. All right, my last question. I know you're such a busy person, and I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk.
Sure, I'm happy to do it.
Since the first time I saw you, I've wanted this. What do you want your legacy to be?
What do I want my legacy to be? That's a great question. I hope that I have impacted people in a way where I've brought better things to their lives and that they smile when they think of me.
And I do. Every time I think of you, I smile and think I want to be just like her when I grow up. I always think that.
Well,
Thank you.
you are amazing yourself. So,
Bye-bye.
bye. Thank you so much. Take care. Are we done?
Hold on, I'm just stopping.